everybody. This is Lisa Hawker. I write as L.S. Hawker, write thrillers, and I'm the author of 4 novels. One of them is a USA Today best-selling novel called The Drowning Game. It was also nominated for a Thriller Award. It's an honor just to be nominated. Obviously, I didn't win. Anyway, today we are going to be talking about what's your canoe, how to identify your manuscript's Achilles heel. And there's a really good reason why it's called that. And I will explain what that means here in a second. As I said, these are my novels. Okay, so this is where the story of the canoe came from. So I was writing my second novel. I got a 3-book deal from HarperCollins back in 2015. And I had a very short period of time to write my second novel, which was kind of a trial by fire. It was kind of horrifying. But, you know, we got through it, and the novel, I really love the novel. But the reason that this workshop is called What is Your Canoe is because in this novel, in the first draft of it, my protagonist owned this property that had a boathouse in it, and some tragic events were around this boathouse. And what do you suppose was in the boathouse but a canoe, okay? Now, for whatever reason, my brain latched onto this canoe. I have no idea why, but my editor at the time said, well, this doesn't make any sense. It's convoluted. I mean, you have to, manipulate all kinds of weird stuff to try and get this to work, and it just doesn't work within the context of the plot. And I was like, I will make it work. Somehow I will make it work. Well, I couldn't make it work, and that's because it didn't belong in the story. And that's where this workshop came from, is since with a lot of my writer friends, we talk about the things that don't belong in our manuscripts as canoes. We call them that, which is kind of a fun little gizmo, and that's where that graphic came from, the dude, snowboarding on a canoe because it doesn't belong. Okay, so let's figure this out. Okay, if you see this picture, this is kind of like what the canoe is all about. Is you look at a picture like this and everything seems normal, right? But something is off about it. Something feels weird, but you can't quite put your finger on it. That's what happens in our manuscripts a lot of times, right? You're like, it works, but there's just something about it that's freaking me out. I don't know what it is. So you look closer, and look, there are these creepy little faces in this picture. And that's what the canoes in your manuscript are. There are these creepy little faces that are screwing up your story. So let's figure out how we can fix that, okay? So canoes generally spring from one or more of the following. In my case, I've done all of these things, so don't feel bad if you've done them also. Okay, the first thing is you're compelled to write something that's never been done before. And I think especially young writers feel compelled to do this, that they want to break the rules and break all the traditions and do something that nobody's ever seen before. And at all costs, we are going to do that because we are going to make a name for ourselves. And it doesn't ever seem to work. Now, good example of this, if you've seen the movie Sideways from, I think it was 2004, Paul Giamatti portrays this kind of sad sack dude who's written this 1,000-page novel, and it's so convoluted. He tried to put everything into there, and he was trying to do something that nobody had ever done before, and he was working on it for years. Now, if you're like me, I had a manuscript that I worked on for more years than I would care to explain. Way too many. And that was part of the problem. But these sorts of novels that have never been done before, they just get more and more convoluted. They don't work, and your readers don't understand what's going on in them. So having the goal of doing something that's never been done before is typically going to result in a canoe. Here's another fun one that I run into at writers' conferences. The writer believes that they've been given a message from Buddha, Muhammad, the universe, the flying spaghetti monster, God. They've given, one of these deities has given them a message that they need to impart to the world. And the problem with this is that then what happens is, because you've gotten the word straight from, the Almighty, not one word can be changed in this manuscript. It must be exactly as it is, flaws and all, and typically there are thousands of flaws. Every manuscript has to be rewritten over and over, no matter who dictated it to you, okay? So many of these qualify in their entirety for canoedom, okay? These poor folks, they always get the same kind of panicked look on their face, Okay, something that's kind of related to being dictated a book from a god. Okay, so you have a cause that you're super passionate about. And the rest, you just are sure that the rest of the world must become aware of this cause and take it up. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to write a novel. And because your novel is crafted around this cause, it turns into a big preach fest, right? This comes at the expense of story, character arc, logic, or common sense. And it's great to have a cause, and things like that can be brought up. I mean, look, for instance, at the writings of Michael Crichton, where he explored all kinds of issues. But the plot and the story and the characters were always the thing. The cause was just part of the story. If you make it front and center, it's going to turn into a canoe, and you're going to need to get rid of it. Sorry. Okay, so here are a couple of examples. For instance, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. The message, objectivism good. And here's the problem. If you've read it, oh my gosh, it took me years to wade through this. Did we really need a 90-page sermon from John Galt? Another example is Climate of Change by Piers Anthony. The problem was that in between lectures on culture, a small group of archetypes, the names like Hero, Haven, and Harbinger act out scenarios that demonstrate Anthony's ideas. The result resembles nothing so much as a middle school textbook with cheery characters attempting to make learning fun, except that these characters are deadly earnest. So, obviously, unless your reader, somebody who's totally passionate about what you're passionate about, they are just going to toss the book aside. And I cannot tell you how many times I threw Atlas Shrugged aside. If you want an Ayn Rand book, get Anthem. It's much better. It's much more succinct and much shorter. So here is a nice little quote for you. Many opinionated writers fail to entertain because they engage in extraneous pontificating rather than make their ideas integral to their stories themselves. The trick is to weave a provocative theme or premise into the very fabric of your story, making it the thread that connects your characters to each other and to the events of the plot. And that is a quote from novelist Joe Moore. Something to keep in mind, keep in the front of your brain. Okay, so the next thing that can make a canoe is something that I in the past have been guilty of. Absolutely. You've got this joke or comedic bit that everyone will love. You just know it. So I love this. I stopped believing for a little while this morning. Journey is going to be so pissed when they find out. So this one manuscript in particular, I had so many what I thought were hilarious bits. I thought they were so funny. And I shoehorned in these elements to make sure that I got to this joke, to these comedic bits. When they made no sense to the story, when they stopped the story dead, that they completely took away from it. This sort of a thing is a huge, huge canoe. And it broke my heart to pull all these things out of this manuscript, but I did. I mean, you can obviously keep comedic bits and jokes and so forth, but not at the expense of plot, character, and story. Okay, so here's an example, and you're welcome for this. Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. Call me wild hair, Kurt said, pointing at a vanity license plate tacked to the front door. Everybody does. You spelled it wrong, Karen said. It should be H-A-I-R. Kurt shook his head. Not according to the state of Kansas. It comes from that saying he got a wild hair up his ass and did something crazy. Excuse my Latin. Karen shook her head back at Kurt. No, the expression is wild hair, H-A-I-R, up your ass. It's a hair, not a hair. But how in the world would a hair get up your ass? How would a rabbit? like I said, you're welcome. It's so embarrassing. But I remember when I was writing this like years ago, but laughing and saying, obviously my own best audience, right? But it obviously stopped the plot dead and it meant nothing. It didn't, I mean, it sort of tells you something about that character, but not enough to keep it in. That was a definite CANOE, unfortunately. Okay, so another thing that can create a CANOE is the desire to control your reader's experience. You're intent on forcing your reader into seeing a character exactly as you do. So you tell us over and over again how beautiful, sexy, handsome, ugly the character is, but we're never shown this. You, the author, are winking at your audience saying, trust me, he's that good looking. Or you take it for granted that people will believe a character is evil just because of a certain belief he has. Again, telling, not showing. Okay, here's something that we might have all fallen into at one time or another, trying to write to the market. For instance, back when Harry Potter first came out, everybody was trying to write about magic schools. And some of those things actually did get published. Or when Twilight was a big thing, vampires, that became the next big thing. And this happens a lot, right? But people try and jump on the train of whatever is selling big because they're more interested in being rich and famous than they are in telling a story. And this can create CANOEs galore. You figure your own ideas don't sell, so why not try writing about vampires or zombies or the Me Too movement? The trap is that you spend so much time trying to accurately portray the cultural moment that character and story go right out the window. Okay, so here's another thing that I am super guilty of, is cannibalizing one story for another. So this is when you're using pieces of an old manuscript in either a new iteration of the manuscript or a new manuscript altogether, which I've done both. But this part that you brought over, the reason that you brought it over is because you're so in love with this anecdote or this bit of dialogue or this description that no matter what you do, it's going to be as out of place as Mike Pence at a Burning Man concert, right? So in the context of the new storyline, it just doesn't fit. In my second novel, Body and Bone, which this seems to come up over and over again, doesn't it? I stuck a character in from an earlier story as my protagonist's love interest. But no matter how I tried to shove him in there, he just didn't fit. He was really from a different time. He was much too old for her. But I had enjoyed writing him so much that I wanted to bring him back and use him some more. But he kept telling me, I don't belong here. And you'll find that with characters plenty of times, right? Also in Body and Bone, originally, there was a character named Ryan who was my protagonist, Nessa's roommate. And he kept walking around and bumping into things, honestly, because he didn't belong in this story. And so he was a CANOE and he had to go. Poor Ryan. Okay, this is a tough one to talk about. So, CANOEs can result when you let sentiment overcome your story sense. And this was especially true in my third novel, which is called End of the Road. And there is a character in there, my main character, her mother, has ALS. And she also has a sister who is autistic. And the original story was just that the sister was autistic, but during the time that I was developing the story, my friend Kim was diagnosed with ALS. And I had such a hard time dealing with it because ALS means you're going to die. I mean, there is no cure for it, as you know. And I had a hard time dealing with it. And so I worked it out within the story. I used my writing to kind of deal with my feelings about Kim and what was happening to her. But it didn't belong in the story. I already had a character who had this challenge, this neurological challenge, and then throwing in another character in the same family who also had a significant health challenge really muddied up the story. It really kind of took away the impact of the autistic sister who was pivotal to the plot. The mom really was not that pivotal to the plot. So that was a big mistake. That was a big mistake. But you know, sometimes we get sentimental and we can't help it. So that's the way that goes. But that was a CANOE, but I didn't take it out. Okay, kind of a subset of letting sentiment overcome your story is also clinging to the original concept even when it no longer makes sense, when it doesn't fit anymore. And that is true of my work in progress, which is titled Right Now Yonder Stands the Sinner. That originally came from something that happened at my brother-in-law's funeral. And that was kind of the premise for the story to begin with. And I kept trying to fit it into the story as the story developed itself and it went in a completely different direction. But I kept going, yeah, but that was my first idea, and that was the thing, you know, that was the thing that sparked the whole story. But it didn't fit. And so that became a CANOE, and I finally did have to let go of it. Okay, when theme becomes a CANOE. According to Chuck Wendig, who we all adore, naturally, you can zero in on your theme by asking these 3 questions. What is this story about? Why do I want to tell the story? And why will anyone care? Those are all great questions. So that becomes a problem when theme is a drop of poison, subtle, unseen, but carried in the bloodstream to the heart and brain just the same. Repeat after me, pen monkeys. Your story is not a sermon. This sort of relates back to the whole cause thing that we were talking about earlier. Also, God dictating a story to you. Your story is not a sermon. Remember that the story is what happens, right? It's about your character's problem. It's not about some high-level idea that you need to get across. If you want to do that, write nonfiction. Fiction readers want a story. They want conflict. They want character. And this can completely destroy your story. This can knock you in the head. Okay, so another theme, diversity. People can really fall into the diversity trap, especially nowadays. And here is a good quote for you. We don't need white authors getting published for writing the stories of people of color. We need more people of color to get published and be represented in an industry that has historically disenfranchised them. And this is from the Read Diverse Books blog, which is really great, by the way. It's a great place to check in to make sure that you are being sensitive to diverse readers out there. But this is really true. I think that we are all becoming aware of this problem, that there aren't enough writers of color being published. And so we're going to swoop in and help. And according to this quote, and according to this blog, that isn't the help they need. They need help getting published. They need their voices recognized. Okay, so here is the diversity paradox that you want to watch out for. And this is also according to the blog we were just talking about. Don't write your protagonist as a person of color. It reeks of white savior complex. And don't write to stereotype, i.e. the sassy gay best friend, which I confess that's what Ryan was in Body and Bone, and that's one of the reasons I took him out. But anyway, here are the do's. Use a diverse cast of characters, which I was able to do in my novel End of the Road, because it was kind of a consortium brought together of these grad students who were all working on an artificial intelligence together at this company called Ciprotech. And so I was able to use all sorts of different backgrounds, and that's the best way to do it. Secondary characters, and you want to focus on universal human emotions, conflicts, and flaws. And that, right, people is people, you know. It's funny how often people fall into stereotypes or things they think they know about other groups of people. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so here's another trap that causes CANOEs, is reality versus fiction. Here is the reality trap. Fiction should make more sense than reality, not less. It should flow logically, cause and effect, okay? Fiction shouldn't try to exactly mirror reality, as in dialogue, and it shouldn't be a random series of events like reality. Now, this early on when I started writing when I was much younger, this is something that I fell victim to because I would write pages and pages and thousands of words of characters just talking like we all talk, with a lot of ums and ers and you knows and likes and that sort of thing. And also random events, and in a way, you can get away with that sort of thing much more in literary fiction, but in genre fiction, commercial fiction, you have to be much more careful. It's funny how often I hear people, when I'm reading a manuscript for somebody, and I'll say, this bit right here doesn't make sense. This part's a CANOE, right? They say, but that's how it really happened. It doesn't matter that that's how it really happened, because real life and fiction world, two different things, okay? You have to remember that you're looking for suspension of disbelief from your readers. And just mirroring reality is not going to help you in that quest. So watch out for those. This is where using a glossary or spreadsheet really comes in handy. And example, right? You want to make sure that your characters have the same eye color all the way through, that their name doesn't change. I was just reading something not too long ago where a character's name just changed in the middle of the manuscript, and that's a problem. Inconsistency that can result in CANOEs. So putting together a spreadsheet where you keep track of the details of your characters, you keep track of the details of events and timelines so that you know what's happened. That really helps also. So inconsistency in characters, things like names, ages, and physical descriptions, key personality traits and quirks, gestures and tics, and the basic character arc and their role in the story. So just keeping track of this stuff is going to make your life a whole lot easier and kind of thwarts any CANOE making. Okay, inconsistency in world building is also can result in CANOEs, and that's locations visited or mentioned throughout the story, era-specific technology, cultural and world events, political and power structures, those things. Again, you want to make sure that they're true to the time, for whatever time period you're writing in. Of course, if it's future science fiction or whatever, you get to make that stuff up, but it needs to be consistent. It can't change during the course of the story. So how do you know if there's a CANOE in your story? And how do you find out what it is? Well, this is the trick, right? I mean, it took me a long time to kind of figure this concept out and figure out that I am like the worst offender on earth of this sort of thing, of trying to shoehorn in things that don't fit or don't work. But here's the thing with first draft, and we all know this, right? First draft, you write through. You're telling yourself the story on that first draft. So just write it. Forget about the CANOEs right off the bat. Just don't even worry about that. But after your first read through, something might feel false, and something probably will, because it's first draft, right? You can't figure out what, so you just ignore it. Using beta readers can be really helpful with this. I have found that my beta readers have pointed out CANOE after CANOE for me, which I so appreciate, so that we can get rid of them. So what is a beta reader? For those of you who don't know, a lot of people have critique groups, or they have trusted friends or whatever. Beta readers can be both friends, or they can be your fans if you're published and you have readers. They can be other writers. Typically I say don't use other writers because they have insider information. They know what's supposed to be there. A reader's perspective can be so helpful at this point because they are going to be more confused because they don't know the inside baseball stuff about writing, right? So ideally, a beta reader should not be one of your usual critique partners. And this is particularly, for instance, I belong to a critique group where we would read through each other's stuff from beginning to end, 20 pages at a time. And if you finish your manuscript and this, your beta reader has already read bits and pieces, they already know what's supposed to be there in your manuscript. And so they won't be able to help you spot the red flags and the CANOEs. Your beta reader also should not be your mom or any person who just wants you to be happy. Okay. It needs to be somebody who's going to look at your stuff with a critical eye, obviously. Okay. And ideally it should not be a writer. Now I break this down rule myself. I use both just readers and writers as well. But it's people that I've been working with for years, and I really trust their judgment. And they are able to weed out all the canoes out of my writing. So yay. Okay. So a beta reader should be a reader in regular life, whether they're a reader or a writer. They should be someone whose judgment you trust in general. So say you have a friend who has set you up with all the wrong people for years, or has gone out with all the wrong people themselves, or makes impulse buys that are insane, or you know what I'm saying. Maybe don't use them. You also want someone who is scrupulously honest, even brutally so. I prefer brutal. Luckily, I've been doing this for so long, and I've been rejected so often that I don't feel anything. I'm completely numb. I have no emotional life left. No, I'm kidding. But making sure that you have somebody who will tell you what is wrong, who will point out the canoes, rather than just using this as a way to have people tell you how awesome you are, what a great writer you are. This is not the purpose of this, okay? Your beta reader should be your ideal reader, somebody who reads in your genre, somebody who understands it. That would be the best way to go. So I have some ideal readers, and I also have some beta readers who read regularly outside my genre. So I use a little bit of both. Okay, so how do you find the right beta readers? So you don't want to expect something for nothing. So offering incentives is always a great idea. Signed copy of your book when it's completed, or gift cards, swag related to the book. I've done all these things. Every single one of my beta readers, I always mention in the acknowledgments in my book, which is always just a nice nod to your beta readers. They get to see their name in print in a book, which is awesome. People love that. So yeah, I just recommend treat your beta readers like cherished children. They will come through for you. Okay, so here are the questions you want to ask your potential beta readers. Do you have enough time to go over the manuscript thoroughly? Do you find flaws in published books regularly? Can you be brutally honest with me? And some people will say, yeah, I can, and then they just can't because they're terrified to hurt your feelings. One of my regular beta readers has gotten to the point where she knows that nothing is going, I'm Teflon, nothing is going to bother me. And so the snarky comments she puts on my manuscripts are a highlight of my day. I love reading them because they make me laugh so hard. But yeah, you just need somebody who's brutally honest. Okay, so that's all from me. I obviously prefer doing this in person because then people can ask questions, and it's a little more interactive. I feel crazy standing in my office, doing this into a camera. But I'm hoping to see all of you next year at all the conferences, because I don't know about you guys, but it is killing me not to get to go be with my people a couple of times this year. So kind of going a little crazy here, and I'm sure we all are a little bit, but I hope you stay well. And if you have any questions, you can email me. You can get in touch with me with any of the social media. You can also get on my website for writers' resources and that sort of thing. But I'd love to hear from you. I would love to hear about your canoes, because it's just a lot of fun to to kind of realize how we screw things up. So if we can make it fun, let's make it fun. Anyway, have a wonderful year until I get to see you again in person.